This here is the 3F UL Gear Lanshan 1 Pro tent, and the first time I've ever slept in it, it was in my backyard last May on a freezing cold and really rainy night, and I absolutely hated it. But we are in Canada here and it's freezing cold outside, so let's take it inside. Last March, I was on the market for a new tent. So I decided to reach out to 3F UL Gear, and they graciously sent me that tent for free. After using it all summer long for about 18 nights on all of my different trips, from the Noir River to the Aigle River to some overnights on Crown Land and to Algonquin Park recently, I am ready to give you my opinion on whether the Lanshan 1 Pro tent is worth your purchase. Now, the truth is that for the first 2 to 5 nights I've spent in that tent, I was having a lot of challenges and I was not a happy camper. To understand why I was having such a challenging time with that tent, I come from a minimum of a 2-person tent, double wall, freestanding tent world. The Lanshan 1 Pro is a 1-person tent, single wall, non-freestanding tent. These are two vastly different worlds. So let me break this down a little bit for you. So the reality about a 2-person tent is that it's really just a 1-person tent with a little bit of extra room so you can bring your gear inside the tent. So now when we downgrade to a 1-person tent, what you realize is that it's really just a coffin. If you've never slept in a 1-person tent, you will see that reducing the floor space that you're used to have with a 2-person tent is and can be certainly a challenge. The second thing is that the Lanshan 1 Pro is a single wall tent. Most tents that you've probably ever used in the past are double wall tents, meaning there's the inner mesh. Over top of it, the fly of the tent will cover the inner mesh. The Lanshan 1 Pro tent is a single wall tent, meaning that the only thing that's separating you inside the tent from outside the tent is the fly of the tent. That is certainly different because you do have to manage condensation very differently in that case. Condensations always happen in a tent, whether it's a double wall or a single wall tent. The difference is that when you're in a double wall tent, you usually have the mesh of the inner tent protecting you from touching the fly of the tent that will be all wet from the condensation. In a single wall tent, you remove that barrier, and now you're a lot more likely to basically turn around in your tent and rub the fly of your tent and maybe get yourself wet or get your sleeping bag wet. So you do have to adjust for that. And lastly, the Lanshan 1 Pro tent is a non-freestanding tent. Unlike any other tents that you've probably used in the past, this tent will not hold itself up unless you stake it out. On top of that, it doesn't even come with poles. You have to use a trekking pole, or you can buy a carbon fiber pole as well. The way it holds up is by using that pole in the middle, you stake it all out on each corner and it holds itself up. The challenge with this is that you can't just pitch your tent anywhere and then pick it up and move it around like you would in all the other tents you've probably used before. The selection of your campsite and where you're gonna pitch your tent becomes extremely important, because if it starts to rain and you realize that the water's pooling on under your tent because you've picked an inappropriate or a bad spot to pitch your tent, which honestly can happen to everyone, happens to me from time to time, you can't just pick it up and put it anywhere else. You're gonna have to tear it down and reset it up after. The other thing with that is that pitching your tent will require a bit more practice and is different and a bit more challenging. That's when, for me, everything changed with this tent, because the reality is that yes, a 1-person tent is small. Yes, the condensation, and especially if it's small, you have to be conscious of that, and that was the annoying part that I had with it myself, is I felt like I had no space in the tent, as well as I felt like I couldn't move or get dressed because I would always be touching the side and the fly of the tent. But what I realized is I was actually pitching it really badly, and that reduced the square footage of the tent on the inside, but as well as the headroom. That's why I was having a hard time, because once I started to better my pitch with this tent, I fell in love with it, because for $220 to $250, depending which vendor you get it from on AliExpress.com, because yes, you do have to get it off of AliExpress. I know it's not ideal. I know it'll take 1 to 2 months to get to your place, but the good news is that it's winter time. So if you buy it right now, you'll for sure have it by the time spring comes around. For that price, you really can't beat it. It's a fantastic tent that's been proven time and time again to be a fantastic tent for me on all of my different adventures this summer. Now, what you get when you buy this tent is 9 stakes to be able to pitch out that tent properly. You're also gonna get all the guy lines, and obviously you're gonna get the body of the tent. As an option, if you want to, you can buy the ground sheet. Although tents are pretty durable to start, I am one to really enjoy giving the longest life possible to my gear, and adding a ground sheet to protect the bottom of your tent is a really good way to add a few years to your tent easily. What it doesn't come with, obviously, and what you're gonna have to supply yourself is the middle pole, because this is a trekking pole tent, so it's designed to be pitched with the trekking poles that you may already have. If you're like me and while you're out canoe camping, you don't want to carry a trekking pole along with you, you can also purchase a carbon fiber pole that's really lightweight, compacts really small. This is what I use for most of my canoe camping trip this summer. If you're interested, by the way, to get this tent, I'll leave the link in the description below so you can go and check it out. Now let's take a look at the tent more specifically and go over all of the specs so you know exactly what the Lanshan 1 Pro is all about. My trail weight for this tent, including the ground sheet, the stakes, the guy lines, my carbon fiber pole, everything comes at 2 pounds, 3 ounces on my scale. It packs pretty small, just a little bigger than a 1 liter Nalgene bottle. The Lanshan 1 Pro is constructed of a 20D dual coated sil nylon, which is super durable. Honestly, when I first took it in my hands, that material looked so thin, it looked like it was gonna rip with nothing. After using it so much all summer long, it has 0 wear and tear. It held up really well. It also has Dyneema reinforced fabric on all the tension point of the tent to really give it more durability. So all the corners will have it, wherever you stake out, all the guy line pullouts are all reinforced places, because you're always gonna wanna try to taut that tent as much as possible, and that reinforced fabric works really well. The tent has a bathtub floor about 4 to 5 inches tall in there, really protecting you from any kind of element if ever it was gonna rain a lot and a lot of water. And what connects the bathtub floor to the actual fly of the tent is a mesh that really allows for that ventilation. One of the challenges that I had when I was first pitching this tent is I used to pitch this tent really close to the ground. Because I didn't pitch it high enough, basically, I would leave very little room for the airflow to be able to come from underneath the fly and above the bathtub floor and into the tent to reduce the condensation. But when it's pitched properly and tall enough, it has a really nice ventilation from the top of the tent to all around the tent, around that bathtub floor. The mesh and the zippers are of really good quality. The only downfall to this tent is that it doesn't come seam sealed. So you will have to buy a seam sealer yourself. You're gonna have to basically take the time to paint on the seam that seam sealer to make sure that it's actually waterproof. If you skip that step and you go out in the rain, your tent will leak. I know it's super annoying, but it'll probably take you 30 to 45 minutes to do the tent. You'll only have to do it once and it'll be completed, and it will be super worth your time. When you look at the livable space on the inside of the tent, you have a triangular bathtub shaped floor. The dimensions of the triangular bathtub floor is 230 inches long by 110 inches wide. So now what does this mean for you is that personally myself, I'm 5'10", and I find that I can easily sleep in there on a 3-inch pad with my sleeping bag and have plenty of room at my feet so that my sleeping bag doesn't touch the fly of the tent. And that's important because of the condensation. You don't want to wet your bag. And I also have enough headroom at my head to feel comfortable. I'm also able to sit up comfortably in the tent and probably still have about half a foot of head clearance. You also have a really decent sized vestibule where I was able to store my 120 liter dry bag from MEC in there with my shoes to protect it all from the element. Another really neat feature that you can have is that the entire vestibule can open up, giving you a really wide angle view from inside the tent. Now, just to be clear, I didn't get myself a small, compactable, ultralight tent just so I can bring a big heavy hammer to be able to pitch it. Winter's just around the corner here and the ground is actually frozen, so that was the only way I was able to pitch it. If you purchased the Lanshan 1 Pro, you'd like more information on how to properly pitch it to maximize the livable space on the inside, but also to minimize the amount of condensation that you have by allowing a lot of airflow. Click on that video right here and I will see you, as always, in the next video. Peace.